On the heels of the Labor Day holiday, we take some time to sit with the Honourable Minister Pia Glover-Roll. Since the cabinet shuffle in September of 2023, Minister Glover-Roll has been navigating the complexities of an expanded role, overseeing significant developments in labour relations and the public service in the Bahamas. Tonight, we'll explore how she's settling into her position and the impacts of her leadership. Under her guidance, pivotal advancements have been made, including the successful ratification of industrial agreements that promised enhanced benefits for thousands of public servants. These agreements mark a milestone in the government's commitment to improving working conditions and compensation for its workforce. But as the cost of living rises, are the steps that government has taken enough? Stay with us. You're watching On the Record. Our show begins on the other side of this break. And welcome back. Since stepping into her role as the substantive minister, Minister Glover-Roll has taken on the hefty responsibilities of steering labour and public service policies through significant change. Her tenure has been marked by a proactive approach to modernising labour relations and enhancing the public service landscape in the Bahamas. Tonight, we're honoured to welcome the Honourable Minister of Labour and Public Service, Pia Glover-Roll. Minister, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jerome.
So anytime my friends are on the show, I always have to put out the disclaimer. So we go way back. We are good friends. We've known each other for a long time. So if you see us get a little love fest started, you understand what's happening. So I want to talk a little bit about the transition and what it's been like, for you. You've transitioned from private life into public life, into a life of service, starting with your election. Then you became state minister, now the substantive minister. So what has that transition been like for you?
Well, Jerome, I think the transition has only been from private to public. I have always been in service. I've always worked in human resources and labor. I've always been involved politically behind the scenes. So now I step into frontline where we're doing it at a larger scale for our country. And that's the passion that drives me. Being able to affect positive change for our nation. Not for us anymore, Jerome. We're a little up there in age, but for the future, for our children, for our children's children. That's the role that I play, and I take that perspective each day when I go into work for the nation. But it has been, for me, professionally, on a professional level, a seamless transition because I continue to do what I've always been doing. I'm a certified labor advocate. I've worked in private sector human resources for over 25 years. I've run my own employment agency, so I understand talent development, training, organizational structure, and what it takes to have a successful human resources organization. And that's what the Ministry of Public Service and Labor is.
So, you've worked in the private sector, but they say working for government is all very, very different.
Quite different.
What has it been like sort of acclimating yourself to the demands and the expectations of the ministry and being that substantive minister now?
Well, Jerome, the level is great, simply because there is bureaucracy. I won't shy away from that. But I'm here not to participate in what is the status quo, but to change it. We hear people complain and say, oh, things take so long, and the bureaucracy and the red tape. But as legislators, as policymakers, we should change the policy to make it easier for our people. And that's a part of what I'm doing in terms of the reimagining of our public service, the reimagining of the way we do labor, what we're doing now in labor that will look forward to a sustainable labor market for the future. Everything that we do should be future focused. And that is the focus for me.
So being in this role really comes with a level of public scrutiny and great expectations. When you talk about the public service, it is by far one of the most front-facing ministries in government today. So how are you managing that scrutiny and also trying to manage the expectations of a public that always wants something now or yesterday?
Jerome, I have always set high standards for myself personally, and that helps in my professional life. I always tell people I'm not a politician, I'm a leader. That transcends this political career. Politics in the Bahamas, though, Jerome, is like a minefield.
So
You're working
true.
hard every day to do the work for the people, with the people. You have the people in mind. However, these sometimes are the same people that are throwing the missiles at you.
Sure.
But you have to keep running. You have to keep towards the finish line. The level of expectation is great, especially in our Bahamas public service, where there is significant, indescribable backlog in terms of human resources matters that have taken decades to be where they are in terms of our workload. But of course, there's the expectation that it's fixed right now.
Even though it's been
fixed
sitting there for 5, 6
overnight.
years, yes.
And we expect you to get this done.
Do you ever get discouraged?
I do not get discouraged because I realized the task at hand when I came into the office. And when I say the office, I mean as the Minister of State for Public Service, because I had the good fortune of being an employee of the Ministry of Public Service prior, being an employee of the Department of Labor prior, and understanding the inner workings of both departments. I don't get discouraged because I understand that my constituents, the public servants, the 23,000 of them across the country, and by extension, the entire labor market of the country, is frustrated in some ways. So if I put their frustration on the scale, I know it's greater than any level of discouragement I can have. But how do I counteract that discouragement? By ensuring that we're doing the work for the people. And those moments when I'm out in a social setting and someone says, thank you, I've been waiting for so long, and now finally. So that moment surpasses any moments of discouragement I could possibly have.
It makes all of it
It makes it
worthwhile.
worth it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It makes it worth it.
Now, you talked about the backlog of a number of matters, years and years of matters that have not been dealt with that you're working to clear. But would you say that has been the most significant challenge, or have there been other challenges that you have met within the public service?
I don't think that has been the most significant challenge because you have to have a strategy. Coming in, my strategy was to engage additional teams to do the work. In other words, employing more hands on deck to get the work done. The work has to be done. Most of it is very routine work. The challenge is, this is the policy, this is the legislation. These things have to happen based on policy, based on legislation. But the legislation is 53 years old, 28 years old in some instances. So are we going to go against the status quo and change the policies, change the regulations, change the legislation so that we don't, after we dig ourselves out of this hole, so that we don't end back up there anytime in the future? That is the challenging work. The challenging work is looking back and ensuring that we are making the changes now so that we don't ever come to this place in our public service again. In 1971, when public service regulations, general orders would have come into play, we have some parts of the general orders that speak to telegrams. We don't have telegrams today.
You have a generation that doesn't even know
What a telegram is.
Yes.
So are we going to just, as the minister, am I just going to say, oh, we'll just ignore that policy? No, Let's do away with it. Let's revise it. Let's amend it. Let's bring it into the 21st century. Let's ensure that what was a 21-step process in 1977 that
paper.
doesn't need to be, that was a manual process that doesn't need to be a 21-step process now, but could possibly be a 7-step process. Why don't we change the policy to ensure that we are becoming more efficient and by extension more productive in our work?
Has there been a particular issue that you have not been able to tackle that keeps you up at night, or that really sits and bothers you, that you can't get to resolve this or tackle this as you wanted to?
Yes, Jerome. The issue of skills mismatch. The Bahamas does not have an unemployment issue. Our unemployment rate is 8.9%. We are in the single digits. We are the envy of many countries around the region and the world. Our current job skills data bank has over 200 available jobs. So when I see people say, I can't find a job, or I'm having a hard time finding a job, we have a serious skills mismatch. However, we have free, I'm going to say complimentary, we have free, so that everybody can understand, training available to our citizens on many levels. We have the University of Bahamas, we have BTVI, we have National Training Agency, we have programs like the National Youth Guard, we have our newly minted National Apprenticeship Program, and a number of other free training opportunities in our country. But what is the part that discourages me? Bahamians not engaging, Bahamians not upskilling, reskilling, tooling, getting themselves prepared for the careers that are available for them. And then saying, well, the foreigners. Well, if we don't have skilled Bahamians, then companies will engage foreigners. We want to see Bahamians engage at top levels, but we have to ensure that our Bahamians are skilled and ready to be able to take on the roles that are available.
You say that, and that is such a real issue for a lot of business owners, just finding the skills.
Yes.
And a few weeks ago, we had the National Training Agency on. We were talking about the whole crime issue.
Yes.
And I was so impressed with the programs that they have and what they do. But like you said, so many of our people are not taking advantage of what you call it, the free training.
Free training. The Department of Labor recently held an employability workshop where we worked with the Bahamas Human Resource Society, and we ensured that we had the options for resume writing, resume building, skills training, all in a one-stop shop. And the turnout was insignificant. So my issue is a seemingly sense of entitlement, Bahamians also wanting to engage jobs as opposed to careers, and that is the focus. That's what keeps me up at night, determining how we are going to ensure that we have career-focused Bahamians. Career speaks to the long term. Career speaks to nation building, and that's what's critical for me in this term of leadership, and ensuring that we engage our labor force in a significant way, in a substantial way, but also in a way that speaks to the long term.
If I may, we have Bahamians out there who will also say to you, I am qualified, I am skilled, but I watch as the foreigners come and take those roles, take those leadership roles, do those jobs that I can do or others can do.
Yes.
And how do we respond to them? How do we strike that balance?
I agree, and that's changing. Our Director of Labor, Mr. Howard Thompson, he's taken that bull definitely by the horn. I can tell you in the past few months that he's been in office, we've denied many expatriates. We've sent a few back home, and I say that unapologetically, because our policy is if there are Bahamians who are skilled and qualified for the roles, they should be considered in the first instance.
And real consideration, not just put out the ad after the eye.
But that's the Departments of Labor's job in terms of enforcement, inspection, a strong understudy program, and ensuring that we are managing the process. In all things, you should manage the process. It is critical for us that Bahamians are engaged in roles that they are skilled for. We have to know that you're skilled. We have to know that you're available and interested. And the Bahamas Department of Labor has gone to bat for Bahamians to ensure that Bahamians are filling top-level roles in organizations throughout our country. And the organizations could come forward and say that that is a mandate that we have now been given. We have heads of agreement that speak to the percentage of Bahamians as opposed to expatriate workers. Most of our companies are now in line because we are actively inspecting, we're actively meeting, we're actively ensuring that we are providing the database of readily skilled Bahamians to fill specific roles.
Just so that we can keep on track with time, I've been waiting to ask you about this. You reimagined and rebranded the 52-week program into the PSPEP, the Public Service Professionals Program. I want to talk about really the success of this and why you found it necessary to revamp it or reimagine it, as you call it.
Jerome, everything is in a name. So first of all, we rebranded it the Public Service Professional Engagement Program because we are engaging professionals. Additionally, we have rebranded the program because we find that the morale has been very low in that you say you're a 52-week worker, but you have been on the program for 4 years, 10 years, 7 years, 18 years, and you're still temporary. That speaks to decrease in morale of an employee. So in this fiscal period, as a matter of fact, we have essentially put the PSPEP program on a pause. We are right-sizing our PSPEP program. We are ensuring at this time that employees that have been on the program historically, that should have been 52-weekers, are now being regularized in post, making sure that they are confirmed and able to move on with their lives and take them out of that place of being in limbo or out of balance. We are then going to, based on audits that we have conducted throughout the public service, right-size our employee engagement program by ensuring that we are filling the gaps that are necessary. Bahamians lament all the time that we continue to hire in government, but hiring is an art. Hiring means filling positions that are available with the skill sets that are available to ensure that the job is done. So no longer will the 52-week program, the PSPEP, be one where we just take employees in. We have to take employees in that are required for the various gaps within our public service. That analysis is being done. We are not going to bring on a new cohort until we are able to right-size, regularize, and identify the skill sets that are required so that we are doing productive human resources, productive engagement to ensure success of our employees.
So no more my MP send me.
No more. You should be qualified for your role and you should be able to fill in a gap that is existing in the public service throughout our country.
All right, Minister, a great first segment, but we've got a lot more to get to when we come back. We'll talk about some of the unresolved issues currently on the Minister's desk. This is On the Record. We're back right after this. And welcome back to On the Record. In this segment, we turn our focus to a recent request for assistance from the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute and explore the ongoing complex relationship between the ministry and the Bahamas Public Services Union. In this report from our Bethany McDermott, we find out why BTVI is calling on the minister. Let's take a look.
A small group of protesters stood outside the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute with tapes across their mouths in silent protest to President Dr. Linda Davis. Union of Tertiary Educators of the Bahamas Vice President Anastasia Brown says the union signed an industrial agreement with BTVI a year ago. However, the union is still pushing to have the agreement enforced. They say they're tired of waiting.
We have followed every protocol that is requesting meetings after meetings and meetings, and they're stalled. We asked them to discuss all the outstanding issues that are dealt with in the contract that affects fall. Fall term is in a couple months. We need those resolved yesterday.
The union is also outraged over what they claim is BTVI challenging the agreement's financial clause. When it comes to the leadership of BTVI, here's what they had to say.
The terms of the hours need to be addressed, okay? We still have behemoths on contract. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas said no reason why behemoths should be on contract in a government entity. Why are you trying to give our behemoth 3-year contract?
Brown says they will return to the front of BTVI every day if necessary until they get the matter resolved. We asked the UTEB vice president if the union reached out to BTVI's president.
We've been sending requesting meetings and meetings and meetings. Her thing is that she does not understand. She needs to meet with the undersecretary. She needs to meet with the permanent secretary. I understand now she's went back to meet with the FS again because she don't understand the formula. Well, maybe that's what the accounting is for. I don't understand Pythagoras theorem, but a math person will. Let the professionals who understand it deal with it.
We reached out to BTVI officials, but they declined to comment on the issue. Still, Brown says they've reached out to the Minister of Labor to intervene. Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Well, we also saw in Grand Bahama last week some union leaders claiming that workers are being put at a disadvantage there. Italia Hall presented that story to us.
Pay, negotiations, casual workers, contract workers, incentive, reclassification.
These labor leaders are sharing some of the issues they say are still affecting workers across the country. President of the Bahamas Educators, Counselors, and Allied Workers Union, Sandra Major, acknowledges the government's efforts with signing several industrial agreements, but she says it's also their job to follow up on what has been agreed upon by both parties.
So the teacher who just retired, why is it taking them so long to get the gratuity? It should not be that way. It is that they have worked and they're now waiting. It's not right.
As it relates to confirmation letters,
there are people who are waiting for confirmation to get a confirmation letter for years.
Area Vice President of the Bahamas Communications and Public Officers Union, Charles Ellis, says some contracts with the union have not been signed.
And our staff have worked tediously. Some persons are doing 2 and 3 jobs and are not being paid for what they've been doing. Every time you go to the table, it's a pushback, a pushback, a pushback. We've now asked the minister to help intervene on our behalf.
Unionist Julian Doyle Russell claims on some construction sites in Grand Bahama, it appears more foreigners are being employed rather than Grand Bahamians.
The disparity between foreign workers and Bahamian workers is outrageous, and I will be calling on you people, like my show chair said, to come out and show yourself on Labor Day, because a person like Sir Lyndon said, who does not think that they should die for something, don't have a right to it.
And with Labor Day set to be celebrated on Friday, June 7th, Ella says she hopes that these concerns are not only addressed temporarily, but permanently.
We like patch up. We're not talking about patch up situations. We're talking about permanent fix for a lifetime.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Italia Hall.
And we are back. So, Minister, you know, everybody call on the minister, they call on the government, they call on the minister. So let's start with BTVI and the situation there and your response to that.
Jerome, in labor relations, social dialogue is most important. I support the workers. They signed an industrial agreement in July of 2023. It's almost July of 2024. Benefits were agreed to in an industrial agreement. Negotiations were had. Conversations were had, and all of the necessary stakeholders are at that table when negotiations happen. If something changes along the way or subsequent to the agreement being signed, communication. As the Minister of Labor, I call on all stakeholders. Communication, social dialogue is what takes us from a place of contention to understanding. With that being said, the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute Board and UTEB has had a meeting, and they are working through the communication issues to ensure that the workers are able to receive what they have agreed to in their industrial agreement almost 11 months ago.
What are the challenges when you're dealing with a private institution that has an agreement or a union that has an agreement or workers with a private institution, but now they call it on the Minister of Labor to intervene. These aren't necessarily your workers, but they want the Minister of Labor.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think people tend to think that everything is the labor minister, when in some negotiations we weren't privy. We have our public service negotiations, but there are private sector negotiations that ends up falling into the lap of the minister. And I'm grateful. That's the job I'm here to do. Anytime myself or the director of labor can mediate, it means that we're getting to a place of conciliation. So we're always willing, available, and ready. We have to understand the facts. We have to understand the details from all parties, and we are without hesitation, and I think we have demonstrated that in the past 3 years, willing to participate to ensure that we bring all matters to an amicable conclusion. Harmonious labor relationship has been our focus. I think it's evident in 27 industrial agreements signed, and I think 90% of them, 99% almost, in terms of execution and deliverables having been, but where there's the case of BTVI or any other unions that are saying that they're not accessing the benefits that were agreed to in their agreement, I welcome them to reach out to the Department of Labor for our support.
So let's jump now to our friends in Grand Bahama. You've heard the area vice president of the BCPOU speaking of unresolved matters. You hear also an issue that we addressed in the last segment, foreign workers coming on construction sites where Bahamians can do the work. Your response to some of those issues?
Well, we have open dialogue with all of our trade unions. We have regular meetings and we have impromptu meetings. In terms of the specific issue in Grand Bahama, I'm not familiar, but I will say whatever issues you have as a union, come to us, let us know. We have consistent dialogue with the BCPOU president, Ms. Sherry Benjamin, and we welcome any concerns to be brought to the table. On the matter of foreign workers, there are special technical skills that some workers require that some Bahamian workers do not possess. However, if there are Bahamian workers who possess those skills and qualifications, they should come forward. We have a skills data bank in our Department of Labor. Anytime we receive an application for any level of expatriate employment, we check our database. And we are able to say, no, we have 5 Bahamians skilled in this area. We have 12 Bahamians skilled in this area. Well, according to our database, we have no Bahamians skilled in this area. But we are going to assist in finding, because we insist that these positions have understudies. Where that is not present, expatriate workers are engaged, but not engaged on a permanent basis, engaged with an understudy, engaged with a limited work permit, but engaged to the point where we are actively encouraging organizations and as a government ensuring that we have Bahamian skilled in these gap areas. However, our construction industry, our industrial industry is booming. So where there is a shortfall of Bahamian workers, organizations have a right to apply for expatriate workers. And if there is no Bahamians to fill the positions, as a government, as a Department of Labor, then we do execute our notice of vacancies.
Well, and the point as well is you have to be in the database.
Yes.
I mean, that's important.
We have to know that you
the government has to know that you have the skill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Many times we are called on as the media to cover these protests. Yes. The union leaders, workers will call us because they are protesting. Oftentimes, when they come to you for a response and others, it is always, it's not that you're surprised, but you would say, we hear sometimes, well, we're still negotiating, or we just had a meeting, or we had a discussion. Sometimes I get the impression that these protests are not necessarily warranted, but just to get attention.
Well, our citizens have freedom of association, a right to demonstrate, a right to protest, and that is their constitutional right. And after the waters calm, we have an open door policy at the Department of Labor, open lines of communication. We are advocates for social dialogue. I have said on record many times, on the record, that we have an open line of communication. We are generally very easily accessible, and we want to talk about it. We can't assist you with something that we're just finding out about when we watch the newscast.
Sure. Or when we
but
call
as
you
we
and
watch,
say,
or
yeah.
when the media, and you know, I agree with you. There are instances where we say, well, we didn't know that was an issue. Now we know. Let's see how we can assist them. And we have been able to ameliorate a number of matters that we may have found out outside of the regular channels of communication. But, the emotion aside, we're about fixing the issues. We want the best for our workers in the country, because I don't know if people realize, but the labor directly affects our social fiber in our nation. It affects a societal norms and the way that we behave. If you are actively engaged in gainful employment and able to take care of yourself and your family, generally you don't look towards a life of criminal activity. So we want everyone working. We want everybody gainfully employed. And we want to make sure that our Bahamian workforce is accessing the best possible opportunities for employment.
You have a particular relationship with the Bahamas Public Services Union. What is the state of that relationship, especially after the industrial agreement in September of 2023?
I think that the Public Service Union, Bahamas Public Service Union, and the Ministry of Public Service and Labor have a great working relationship. We communicate frequently. There are so many matters that need to be fixed. There are so many matters that need to be ameliorated. There's so many historic matters that just we need to ensure that we are working through, bringing to successful conclusion or resolution for our workers. And we're working together on it. We have a relationship where we're informed of what the issues are, and we sometimes have them in our view, and sometimes we don't. The Ministry of Public Service has under 200 employees to service 23,000 public servants. That's still partially, we're not there yet, we're still partially a manual system, analog, paper files. So Jerome has a file and he's been in the service for 30 years. So that isn't just a file, that's a volume. And,
Wow.
We have human beings that are going through this
Sure.
file to ensure that matters are taken care of. So it's a work in progress. I am pleased that we're making steady progress on ameliorating the matters, but simultaneously, we have to ensure we aren't there again. And that speaks to policy reform and legislative reform that has to take place as we also digitalize. So there's a lot of moving parts. The BPSU, we ensure as much as possible that they understand the work that we do. We ensure as much as possible that we include them in the conversation, the social dialogue once again. But where there is need for them to agitate because they're absolutely frustrated, that is their constitutional right.
A good position to take because, as you said, people have a right to assemble and to demonstrate, and that's important. Before we go to the break, the government, the ministry did something a little different with the appointment of the Director of Labor. Traditionally, this person has been someone who is a trade unionist, who has been in the trade union movement. But this time around, you have a Director of Labor who comes from a very different background in a Mr. Howard Thompson. Why was that decision made, and how is he working out?
He's working out beautifully. He has the right temperament. He has an employment law background as an attorney. And we saw the opportunity and the need to pivot to somebody with a legal background, somebody who understands employment law, and somebody who can assist us as we transition, as we revise, as we amend, as we reimagine the policies and the laws that govern labor in our country. He's an ideal fit. He's been working well. He's very hands-on. He takes on the matters head on, and he ensures that we work through matters to successful conclusions. So he's doing an excellent job.
Why is
so far.
that arbitration so important? And I think that may have been the component that we weren't getting in the past.
It's important because all things are based on law. We have the Employment Act, we have the Industrial Relations Act, we have the Public Service Regulations, we have laws, and then we have the industrial agreements that are very legally drafted. And that level of engagement of a director is critical because many of the matters that we see that have been dragging out simply required a legal mind to be applied. So we saw an opportunity to pivot, try something new, challenge the status quo. If we've been doing it this way for so long and clearly it's not really working well, why don't we shift the way that we do things? That's been our overall strategy in everything that we're doing in the reimagination of public service and labor in our country. If it's not working, let's pivot. Let's try it a new way.
Because, we have a saying, we've been doing it this way all this time.
And we want to do it the exact opposite. If we've been doing it this way all the time and we're not getting the results that are required, let's shift a little.
Let's move. Let's do it differently. Minister, we still have a bit to talk about. When we come back in our final segment, we're going to talk to the minister about the current state of the Employment Act. Is there more to be done? Stay with us. You're watching On the Record. And we're back. This is our final segment. Tonight, we examine the Employment Act. While it serves as the framework governing employment relations in the Bahamas, like any other piece of legislation, as times change, there may be room for updates. If it's one thing COVID has taught us, is there are lots of ways to get work done. Minister, how open is the government to amending this act?
This administration is very open to amendments. And not only because we have laid out in our blueprint for change the advancements that we'd like to see, but also I've traveled across the world to many international labor forums. And I want to say that the Bahamas is a labor leader. We're leading in collective bargaining. Our Prime Minister is leading the conversation on climate change. But what's important is that we are also ensuring that we are staying in line with international standards. As the world evolves, so should our policies. When it comes to labor policy in the Bahamas, our policies, our laws in some instances date back 53 years, 28 years. Our labor force, our world has evolved. The Ministry of Public Service, analog, paper files, typewriters still exist in our ministry.
Minister, typewriters?
We have the political will to make the necessary changes.
Good Lord.
I can tell you that at this time, I have planned a working symposium for the month of July where all stakeholders will be a part of this. And I believe in tripartism. I believe in social dialogue. We are having a working symposium where we're not only going to look at the Employment Act, Jerome, that's one of our latest pieces of legislation. We're going to look at the Industrial Relations Act. We're going to look at the infamous general orders, public service regulations. These are pieces of legislation that date back to 1971. We have to ensure that in the 50 years that we have been an independent nation, that our laws and policies continue to evolve with the times. We should even look 10 years ahead because of digital transformation.
Sure.
The triple transformation speaks transition globally in terms of labor, speaks to climate change. How does climate affect our workforce?
Never even thought of it. Wow.
How can I ask a worker to pave with hot tar in 98-degree
100
temperature
degrees, yeah.
for 8 hours a day?
yeah.
How are
It's
we
not
managing
practical. Yeah.
thermal stress for our workers? There's digital transition. Digital transition is evolving by the second. How are we as a nation conforming our legislation? Where's our AI policy? Yes, we're working on those things. But where are we in terms of legislation when it comes to the digital side of things? And of course, the continued conversation of social justice, ensuring that our workers are thought of as human beings, where the ethics is applied. That's where you get the conversation of paternity leave. That's where you get the conversation of should retirement age be increased. These are the conversations that we're already having through the National Tripartite Council and the Department of Labor. So a working symposium is already planned for the month of July, where we're going to bring all stakeholders to the table. That's the trade unions, That's the employer confederations. That's the Ministry of Finance, because nothing happens without money. That's national insurance. That's human resources consultants. That's private sector HR. That's whomever needs to be there to say, these are the recommendations we have for amendment to the Employment Act, the Industrial Relations Act, general orders, whatever. These are the conversations that we need to have. And at the end of that symposium that I'm planning and will be hosting, I expect a white paper of the recommendations that will be made, because we're not doing all of this work and trying to clear the backlogs and ensuring harmonious labor relations to go right back to being at this place in another 10 years. That is going to take process change, and process change has to come through legislative change. And we are there for it. We are here for it, and it's going to happen.
I'm excited to hear about these things, because I think what the biggest, frustration the public has with the public service many times is the inability to get things done in a timely manner, and practical things. And one of the things you mentioned is general orders. I think a lot of I'll be very honest, I think public servants hide behind the general orders, because general orders will prevent some things from happening with just pressing a button or 2 steps. And
you said it correctly. The inability to get a lot of things done, in particular in the public service, is policy laden. We have a policy that we've been working on, and if I had my way, it would have been amended in year 1. But I've been working with the trade unions, and I'm so pleased with our collaboration on that. It's something called a course overload policy, and public servants can relate to it. That says you can't take over a certain amount of courses. And if you go ahead and take more courses, we're not going to consider them, and you have to retake them. But the policy says that. But Jerome, the policy says that. And we have to operate within policy. So my attitude as the Minister of Labor and Public Service is change the policy.
Yeah.
Why can't we? That's what we're here to do. We're not maintaining the status quo, Jerome.
So I'm very happy to hear that these things are under consideration and for real change. And a couple things I just want to bring to the fore. Many men have expressed concern that the current Employment Act does not adequately support their involvement in family life. And we keep hearing time after time, the men aren't there, they aren't showing up, they're absent from the family. But are you looking at granular issues like really the role of men, and even, paternal leave, things like that, that are important in a modern society?
Let's look at our societal issues today, where we speak about the village used to raise the child, and now no one's raising the child because mommy has 3 jobs. Daddy can't get time off from work. There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we ensuring that our family structure is strengthened? It goes back to what you're talking about. Where are we making amends for our men to be a part of from birth and in those formative years? Should there's a conversation, should maternity leave be extended so that the mother can spend more time with the child in those formative months? These are the conversations that are being had right now amongst our stakeholders as we envision a reimagination of our legislation. Let's talk about ensuring that our family structure is wholesome, strong, and there's a solid foundation. And a lot of what we are seeing, our legislation may not serve those purposes. So we should, and we will be looking into the fact that we have to incorporate the full family. I will say to you, though, that in one of our 27 industrial agreements signed, one of them made a provision for paternity leave. So we've cracked the ceiling, and the ceiling is about to be shattered, I think, through our symposium on ensuring that legislative reform is achieved.
I mean, you look around the world, this is something that has been implemented, for over a decade. Men have been, allowed to take time off for family matters. One of the issues that I'm sure that you are faced with in the public service, as we are in the private sector, and anyone who is anywhere in the world, is the rising cost of living.
Yes.
Everything has gone up, continues to go up. And, there's always this discussion about having to do more work for the same pay. And even now, as we look, we're weeks away from an increase in national insurance contribution. As the minister at that cabinet table, what kind of discussion is happening about adjusting, minimum wage, or ensuring that workers are able to do more with with their earnings?
So, Jerome, the conversation of rising cost of living, I want to remind Bahamians that we are a consumer nation. I want to remind Bahamians that we are part of a global territory. Hyperinflation is happening worldwide. I think when I watch the comments and I listen to the commentary sometime, I think Bahamians think that the cost of living is only increasing here in the Bahamas. That's not
We
so.
think that about many other things.
Yeah,
too.
we think
You
it's
know.
only happening here. So let's broaden our perspective. Hyperinflation post-COVID, post natural disasters is real globally. As a nation and as a cabinet, of course, we're ensuring that we are as sensitive as we can be while still managing the resources of our country to ensure that our citizens can survive. That means social programs that we have to strengthen, but that also means ensuring, as we did, that we increase the minimum wage. Jerome, everyone doesn't make minimum wage. There's a small percentage of people that make minimum wage in our country. Those persons, we have to make sure, the least amongst us, that we take care of them. Yes, there's been an increase in national insurance contributions that will come July 1st. That took political will. Many successive governments were informed that this had to happen. Actuarial reports spoke to the fact that our fund is no longer sustainable. Just came back from a global forum in Costa Rica who's their national insurance scheme is 80 years old, and they now have to look at increasing the retirement age because their program is not sustainable. Where there's lack of sustainability, we have to find an opportunity to sustain. That incorporates, unfortunately, an increase in the first instance. And I've seen the commentary that you give us minimum wage and you have the increase. Minimum wage increase, if we work the figures, is the increase in national insurance is a small portion of what would have been received in a minimum wage increase. So it doesn't encapsulate the whole increase in terms of national insurance increase wipes out the minimum wage. That commentary isn't exactly factual that I've been hearing. But the point is, we have to find ways to ensure that our employees, our labor force, is at their best earning ability. And that comes through engaging a culture of lifelong learning. As you are employed on a job, I say this to public service and I say this to the wider workforce, continue to improve yourself, continue to engage in training so that you continue to engage up the ladder. Promotions aren't entitlements, promotions are earned. You have to be able to be capably skilled to engage the next level of employment. That also comes with another level of compensation.
Not necessarily because you've been there 10, 15, 20 years, you automatically.
Tenure is not always it.
When you look at, or as you get ready now to look at things like the Employment Act and general orders and looking at the things that affect, workplace environments, are you looking also at things like protections against discrimination? When you look at also a lot of private companies now have a huge emphasis on diversity and inclusion in the workplace, are these things that are also being discussed at the public service level?
Absolutely. We have a global mandate, Jerome. We are part of the ILO. We are part of the UN. We've signed on to certain conventions. There are sustainable development goals that our country must also achieve along with the global territory. And they speak to matters of inclusion. They speak to matters of diversity, and they speak to matters of human rights. I always say the triple transition not only speaks to the climate change and the digital transformation, but social justice is a significant part, ensuring that workers' benefits are intact, but ensuring workers' dignity is intact. And that's a part of the overall equation that we're working towards in our overall Decent Work Country program, in which the Bahamas is the first in our region to sign on to our second generation Decent Work Country program, which is a part of our national apprenticeship. This is a spinoff of our Decent Work Country program. So we have a mandate to ensure that we are in line with conventions and standards, not only locally, but internationally.
As we get ready to wrap up, all of the work that you were doing to improve the public service, to improve labor relations, to give Bahamians an opportunity to work and excel in their own country and to upskill. Yet, when you look at the ongoing brain drain,
Yes.
the amount of Bahamians who either seek education abroad and don't return, or outright seek employment opportunities outside of the country and don't return.
Yes.
That, all of the work that you are doing will be for naught if we are not able to keep our people and attract our young people to come back. And I know this doesn't rest solely with you, but I'm sure it is something that you have discussed at this level. And what are we doing to try and bring our young people and the best and the brightest back home?
Jerome, I think it's a matter of ensuring that they understand that they are a part of the inclusion that we speak about. Ensuring that we provide opportunities, not only, of course, in public sector, but in private sector, that matches their skill set and qualifications. We hear many of our graduates who say, I'm not coming back home, say, because y'all can't pay me. But we have the opportunity where, we have expatriates, and I can be honest with you, engaged in roles here in the country where we're paying them.
Of course, we're finding the money to pay them.
So
I'm with
we
you on
have
that,
to
yes.
ensure through, especially in my small part of the portfolio, my work in labor, that we are attracting Bahamians, that we know that Bahamians are skilled and capable to perform the roles, but we're attracting Bahamians and ensuring that we're diligently working to place Bahamians in those roles. Where we're headhunting outside of the country for our own. Our Bahamas Department of Labor Skills Data Bank, I think we're going on a campaign in this fiscal period to help the Bahamas and the diaspora understand what that tool is. That is not an employment tool where you register when you're looking for a job. That is a skills bank where we need to know that there is a Bahamian in Tallahassee that is an engineer, but there's also a Bahamian in Australia who is a quantity surveyor. We need to know the skill sets of Bahamians across the globe, because I've been communicating with a number of Bahamians who are coming back home because now we know that they have certain skill sets that we thought didn't exist amongst our workforce, our labor force, that we can now say, come back home, there's this opportunity for you. But we have to know. So I say to Bahamians abroad, ensure that you register in the Bahamas Department of Labor Skills Data Bank. Ensure that we know what you're skilled at. Yes, demand what you deserve for your skill set, but make sure that we know, so that as we analyze our labor force, as we seek to fill our gaps, we can say without fear of contradiction and with confidence that Bahamians are skilled in this skill set. We need to know. Where there are Bahamians who say, well, I've applied, but I wasn't given the opportunity, I say have a conversation with the Bahamas Department of Labor. There are lots that we don't know about. There are private organizations who will say, we've tried to find Bahamians, but we can't. That's the Bahamas Department of Labor role, to say, well, here are 5 that we think you should see, that we have screened. It's all social dialogue. We can't manage what we don't know. We want Bahamians to come back home and help to build our nation. Some will, some won't. But those that will, and those that are interested, and there are many out there, we welcome them, and we will play our part as an administration to ensure that we're finding adequate placement for our Bahamian workers.
And pay that quantity surveyor from Australia, because if it was Australian, we'd be happy to pay them. Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. Minister, I can't tell you, how uplifting this conversation has been, not just because you're my friend, but how uplifting this has been, because I can see the direction that you're moving in. There is a plan. There are lots of programs that you're working on, and you're looking at the future. And that's important, because, whereas we live for today, we live in today, but we must always work towards tomorrow. And that's so very important.
We're doing the work today for a sustainable labor force tomorrow. I think our efforts are emblematic of our understanding that labor is a powerful force for societal change and for societal good. And I said that at the top of the show. How our labor force is shaped ultimately shapes the way our society conforms. So we want to have positive engagement so that it can ultimately lend to a positive, a peaceful society.
Well, keep up the good work. God bless you. Keep it up, and I'm very happy that you came.
Happy that I
Finally,
made it.
we've been talking for
It's
a
good
while.
to be here.
Finally able to get you on to talk about some of the great work that you're doing. So keep up the good work. And we're happy that you agreed to come on and to let the public know all the things that you are doing. That's very important. All right. So thanks again. It's no secret that labor relations in the Bahamas have improved significantly under Minister Glover Roll's stewardship. Yet, as we've heard tonight, there's always room for growth and future development. Minister, your dedication and proactive work have not gone unnoticed, and we appreciate all that you are doing, not just meet, but exceed the expectations of your office. We wish you all the best as you continue to navigate the complexities of your role. To our audience, thank you for tuning in and engaging with these crucial topics that affect all of us as citizens and workers. Until next time, stay informed and keep the conversation going. Good night, everyone.